A millionaire hired a homeless woman to bear his child. But the truth broke him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain poured down the dark streets of New York, pooling in the cracks of the sidewalk. A black luxury car slowed beside an alley where a woman sat beneath a flickering streetlight. Her coat was thin, her hair damp, her eyes tired. For 3 nights, she had slept on cardboard near a coffee shop that no longer let her in after closing. The window of the car rolled down, and a man's voice, calm and deliberate, broke through the sound of the rain. "Miss, I have an offer. It is not something you will hear every day." She looked up, startled. Inside sat a man in his 30s. Tailored suit, dark hair slicked back. The kind of face that belonged in magazines. She stepped closer, cautious. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice hoarse from the cold. The man studied her for a long moment. "My name is Alexander Reed. I need someone to bear a child for me. You would be compensated more than you can imagine." Her breath caught. "You are joking." "I am not," he replied quietly. "You will have a private residence, medical care, and $5 million when the child is born. There are rules. Of course, no press, no contact, no emotional involvement." The woman laughed once, bitterly. "You think money can buy everything?" Alexander's gaze did not waver. "No, but it can buy a chance to continue what I have lost." For a moment, the city noise faded. Only the rain filled the silence between them. She could have walked away, but her stomach was empty, her hands shaking, and the face of her late mother flashed in her mind, the woman who used to say, "When life pushes you to the edge, hold on to whatever keeps you standing." She whispered, "Why me?" Alexander looked out the window, his voice suddenly softer. "Because you have nothing to lose, and I have lost everything." Her eyes narrowed. "You mean your wife?" He nodded once, the faintest tremor in his jaw. "She died during childbirth 3 years ago. The baby did not survive either. Since then, I have not been able to let anyone in, but I cannot live with silence anymore." The woman hesitated. Lightning flashed across the street. The man opened the door and held out a folded envelope. Inside was a hotel card key and a business card embossed with gold letters. A.R. Industries. "Stay warm tonight," he said. "If you decide to accept, come to that address tomorrow at 10 a.m. There will be a contract ready." The car door shut, and the engine faded into the storm. She stood there, and soaked, clutching the envelope against her chest. For the first time in months, she felt something stranger than fear, hope mixed with disbelief. She looked up at the gray sky and whispered to herself, "What kind of man pays for a child?" Far above the city, in his penthouse of glass and silence, Alexander Reed poured himself a drink he would not finish. His reflection in the window looked hollow. The rain outside blurred the skyline, but he could still see the ghost of his past, the hospital room, the monitor flatlining, the last touch of his wife's hand. He closed his eyes and whispered, "One last chance. That is all I am asking for." And somewhere across the city, the woman he had chosen stared at the keycard, glowing faintly in her palm. The next morning, the gray light of dawn slipped through the narrow cracks of the motel blinds. Claire sat on the edge of the small bed, staring at the folded envelope from last night. It looked ordinary, yet it pulsed in her hands like something alive. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the man's voice echoed in her mind, calm, rich, and impossible to forget. Alexander Reed. She had heard that name once before on a television in a coffee shop. Millionaire investor, real estate tycoon, the kind of man who made headlines when he sneezed. But the man she met last night was not the smiling face from magazine covers. There had been something hollow behind his eyes, like he was talking through glass. Claire rubbed her hands together, the skin rough from the cold. She had been living on the streets for nearly 6 months since the diner she worked at shut down. Her mother's death had drained what little savings she had. and the rent notices kept coming until one day the door simply locked behind her. She tried shelters, but they were full. Nights blurred together, rain, besetted, fear, the sound of footsteps behind her in the dark. Now, one envelope promised everything she had lost: food, warmth, a roof, dignity. But at what cost? She looked at the clock on the wall. Joe, 24 a.m. Her heart thudded. If I leave now, she whispered, I can make it by 10. Outside, the city buzzed awake. Steam rose from sewer grates, taxis honked, and people in pressed suits rushed to lives that had no room for her. Claire pulled her hood tight, the hotel keycard heavy in her pocket. She walked the 12 blocks to the address on the business card, Reed Holdings, 48th and Madison. The building towered above her, all glass and chrome, reflecting the gray sky like an endless mirror. Security guards at the entrance glanced at her tattered coat, but said nothing. She felt small, invisible, and somehow exposed at the same time. At the reception desk, a woman in a navy suit looked up. Can I help you? Claire's throat tightened. I have a meeting with Mr. Reed. The receptionist's eyes flicked over her. Disbelief, thinly masked by professionalism. Name, please. Claire Evans. A pause. Then a phone call. Moments later, an elevator door opened, and a man in a black suit appeared. Miss Evans, follow me. The elevator rose silently, each floor number glowing like a countdown. Claire's palms were damp. When the doors opened, the air felt different, cooler. Why they're 7? Expensive. Alexander stood near the window, a skyline of Manhattan stretching behind him. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. You came? She nodded. I do not know why, but yes. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit down, please. On the table lay a stack of papers, a pen, and a glass of water. The top page read in bold letters, Contract of Surrogacy and Confidentiality Agreement. Alexander spoke evenly. You will live in a private residence under medical supervision. Every need will be covered. When the child is born, you will receive $5 million and permanent housing. In return, you agree to complete confidentiality and no future contact with the child. Claire stared at the papers, her pulse loud in her ears. And if I change my mind? He met her gaze. Then you walk away. No harm. No payment. The silence stretched. She wanted to ask why me, but she already knew because she was nobody. A name lost in the city's noise. Alexander pushed the pen toward her. You do not have to decide today. Claire's fingers trembled. She picked up the pen, then set it down again. You said this is about something you lost, she said softly. What was it, Mr. Reed? His jaw tightened. A family. Something inside her shifted. It was not pity, exactly more like recognition. 2 broken people, staring across a desk made of glass, both pretending they still had control. She stood slowly. Give me until tomorrow. He nodded once. 10 a.m. Sharp. As she left, the rain began again, tapping softly against the building's wide windows. Claire stepped into the gray morning, the contract still echoing in her mind. $5 million could buy back her life. But something in Alexander's eyes warned her that this deal was more than business. It was a wound disguised as an offer, and accepting it might heal her or destroy her completely. Morning came gray and cold. Claire stood in front of the glass tower once again, her reflection faint on the door. She had not slept. Not really. The contract had lain on the motel table all night, its words burning in her mind. $5 million. Confidentiality. No contact. No love. Each line had felt like a wall being built around her heart. Now she was here to sign it. Her clothes were still damp from yesterday's rain. The receptionist recognized her and silently buzzed her up. The elevator ride felt longer this time, the hum of machinery matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. When the doors opened, Alexander Reed was already waiting. His navy suit was perfect, his tie straight, his posture almost military. The smell of coffee and cedar filled the office. Without speaking, he gestured to the same chair as before. On the desk lay the same documents, this time marked with sticky notes where she needed to sign. A sleek pen rested on top. Alexander's eyes flicked to her face. Miss Evans, if you still wish to proceed, We will finalize this now. Your residents and medical team are prepared. Claire took a deep breath. And if I cannot do it, then you leave. He replied simply. No one will contact you again. She stared at the papers, at the lines of legal language she barely understood. She felt the weight of the city pressing against the windows, the endless hum of life moving on without her. Then she remembered her mother's voice. Gentle and steady. You survive by choosing, not waiting. Claire picked up the pen. Her hand shook once, then steadied. She signed her name slowly, clearly on each page. When she was done, she set the pen down with a quiet click. Alexander reached forward, turned the pages to confirm, then offered his hand. Welcome to the arrangement. His handshake was firm, businesslike. But when his skin touched hers, something unexpected flickered through her warmth. Brief, but real. He pressed a button on his desk. A woman entered, tall, composed, wearing a white medical coat. This is Dr. Harper, Alexander said. She will oversee your health throughout the pregnancy. You will be moving into the Willow estate this afternoon. It is private, fully staffed, and secure. Dr. Harper smiled politely. We will run a few baseline tests first. After that, you will have everything you need. Miss Evans? Claire nodded faintly. Words caught in her throat. The world was moving too fast. Like she had stepped onto a train, she could no longer stop. As she stood to leave, Alexander spoke again, his voice quieter. One more thing. The child will carry my last name. That is not negotiable. She met his gaze. And what about the mother's name? His expression softened. Just for a heartbeat. It will be remembered, he said. Even if it is never spoken. Claire followed Dr. Harper through the hallway, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor. In her pocket, she kept a small wooden keychain, shaped like a guitar pick, the only thing left from her old life. Carved by her mother when she was 16. She ran her thumb over its smooth edge. The word hope faintly scratched into the surface. Hours later, she sat in the back seat of a black sedan driving north. The city fading behind her. Through the tinted glass, skyscrapers gave way to trees and open space. The car turned through wrought iron gates marked Willow Estate. The mansion loomed ahead, white stone, tall windows, and gardens wrapped in mist. Inside, everything smelled of lavender and polish. Soft light filtered through heavy curtains. A nurse led her upstairs to a bright, quiet room with fresh sheets and a view of the lake. On the dresser, someone had placed a folded blanket and a note. Rest. You are safe here. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, still, holding her guitar pick. Safe, she thought, but not free. In his office downtown, Alexander stood alone, staring at the signed contract. For the first time in years, the silence around him felt heavier than comfort. It felt like consequence. He poured himself a glass of water, set it down untouched, and whispered, "Do not make me feel again." But deep down, he knew it was already too late. Days at Willow Estate unfolded like a routine Claire had never known before. Each morning began with the soft chime of a clock and the quiet footsteps of staff bringing her breakfast on a silver tray. Fresh fruit, eggs, tea served in porcelain cups, so far from the plastic-wrapped sandwiches she used to find in donation boxes. Yet the comfort felt strange, almost borrowed. Dr. Harper visited daily, checking her vitals, speaking gently but with professional distance. "Everything looks good," she would say. "You are adjusting well." Claire would nod and smile, though her nights told a different story. Sleep rarely came easily. The silence of the estate was too clean, too perfect. Outside her window, the lake glimmered like glass, reflecting a world that did not feel real. She tried to fill the emptiness by writing in a small notebook she found on the bedside table. Grocery lists, fragments of old dreams, the lyrics of songs her mother used to hum while folding laundry. But every word came out heavy, as if she was writing through fog. One afternoon, as she walked through the long corridor toward the garden, she heard piano music echoing faintly from downstairs. The melody was slow, mournful, and alive in a way that caught her off guard. She followed the sound to the music room. Alexander Reed sat at the grand piano, sleeves rolled to his elbows, eyes closed as his fingers moved over the keys. It was the first time she had seen him outside of his office suit. For a moment, He looked almost human, less like the untouchable millionaire who had hired her, and more like a man trying to remember how to breathe. When the song ended, he noticed her standing at the doorway. "Miss Evans," he said, too straightening. "I did not expect company." "I heard music," she replied quietly. "It was beautiful." He gave a faint, almost embarrassed smile. "I used to play with my wife. I stopped after she passed." The room fell silent again. Claire hesitated, then stepped closer. "You should not stop doing the things that make you feel alive." Alexander studied her face for a long second, something soft flickering in his eyes. "And what makes you feel alive, Miss Evans?" She smiled faintly. "Hope, I guess. Even when it is foolish." He nodded once, almost to himself, then turned back to the piano. "You can stay if you like. I will not charge for admission." She laughed a small, surprised sound that echoed through the quiet room. For the first time, the air between them did not feel cold. Over the following weeks, their interactions grew less formal. Alexander would join her for afternoon tea in the garden or ask about her checkups. He rarely talked about himself, but his questions about her life carried genuine curiosity. She told him about working at the diner, about her mother, about the wooden guitar pick she kept in her pocket. One evening, while the sun dipped low over the lake, he asked, "Do you miss who you were before all of this?" Claire looked at the rippling water. "Sometimes," she said, "but I think she had to disappear so this version of me could survive." Alexander's gaze lingered on her profile, thoughtful, almost tender. "Survival," he said softly, "is something we both seem to understand." He stood, then handed her a thin blanket. "It gets cold by the lake after sunset. Do not stay out too long." As he walked away, she felt warmth spread through her chest, a warmth she had not felt in years. Later that night, alone in her room, Claire touched the contract folded in the drawer beside her bed. The words no longer looked like chains. They looked like a fragile bridge, one she was already walking across without realizing it. And somewhere in the mansion, Alexander sat again at the piano, his hands hovering over the keys, wondering why every note he played began to sound like her name. The first snow arrived early that year, soft flakes drifting through the gray sky and landing on the stone balconies of Willow Estate. Claire stood by the window, wrapped in a knitted shawl, her hand resting lightly on her growing belly. Dr. Harper had said everything was progressing beautifully, and yet the weight she carried was more than just physical. Every heartbeat inside her reminded her that this child belonged to a world she was only renting space in. Alexander had been away for several days on business. Meetings in the city that stretched late into the night. The house felt emptier without him. She caught herself listening for the sound of the piano, for footsteps in the corridor that never came. When he finally returned one evening, snow dusted his shoulders and exhaustion darkened his eyes. He found her reading in the sitting room. "You should not be up this late," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "I could say the same to you." He hesitated, then sat across from her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fireplace crackled between them, filling the silence with warmth. "How have you been?" he asked. "Fine," she said softly. "The baby is strong." He nodded, his gaze drifting to the notebook in her lap. "Do you still write every day?" "Only when I remember how to hope," she replied. A corner of his mouth lifted. "Then I hope you never stop." That night marked a shift. The next morning, Alexander invited her to join him for breakfast in the main dining hall. It was a vast room, sunlight spilling across polished floors and crystal glasses. For once, it did not feel like a stage. It felt like home, almost. As days passed, he began including her in small routines. They would walk through the winter garden, or sit in the conservatory while he worked on his laptop, occasionally asking for her opinion on things she barely understood. Sometimes he would catch her watching him, and he would smile quick, unguarded, gone in an instant. One afternoon, as the staff prepared for a company event in the city, Alexander approached her with an invitation in hand. "There is a dinner tonight," he said. "It is formal, but harmless. I need to make an appearance, and I thought you might like to come." Claire froze. "You want me to go with you?" "As what exactly?" His expression was careful. "As my guest? Nothing more." She searched his face, unsure whether to believe him. "Do people there know about this arrangement?" "No," he said quickly, "and they never will. You are under no obligation." But I think you deserve one evening where you are seen as someone, not something." The sincerity in his tone melted her hesitation. "All right," she said quietly. That evening, she stood before a mirror wearing a simple navy dress. One of the maids had chosen. Her hair, once dull and tangled, framed her face in soft waves. She almost did not recognize herself. When Alexander entered the room, he stopped mid-step. For the first time, words failed him. He cleared his throat. "You look lovely." Claire laughed softly. "Careful, Mr. Reed." That almost sounded like a compliment. "Maybe it was," he replied. At the gala, chandeliers glimmered and cameras flashed. Alexander guided her through the crowd with quiet assurance, his hand resting at the small of her back. People greeted him with respect, nodding politely to her, assuming she was another investor or family friend. When a journalist asked an intrusive question about his private life, Alexander surprised everyone. "I am grateful for the people who remind me that success is nothing without kindness," he said, glancing at Claire. The room went still for a heartbeat. She felt the weight of his gaze, steady and unguarded, and something inside her trembled. Later that night, back at the estate, Claire stood by the frozen lake while snowflakes fell around her. Alexander joined her, hands in his coat pockets. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "You made tonight easier," she smiled. "You made it memorable." For the first time since she arrived, the air between them was not filled with rules or distance. It was filled with something fragile, unnamed, something that felt dangerously close to real. The storm began on a Thursday evening, the kind that turned the sky black hours before sunset. Inside the estate, the lights flickered once, then steadied. Claire was in the nursery, folding tiny clothes that Dr. Harper had brought earlier that week. The baby was due in less than 2 months. Everything should have felt safe, certain, prepared, but that night, unease filled the air like static. Alexander had been distant again. After weeks of warmth, he had pulled back, burying himself in meetings and phone calls. The gala had drawn attention, more attention than either of them wanted. A gossip column had printed her picture beside his, with the headline, "Mystery Woman Seen with Reclusive Billionaire Alexander Reed." Claire tried to ignore it, but the whispers had started spreading online. Dr. Harper had warned her, "You must stay indoors for now. Mr. Reed is handling the situation." But what she did not know was that the situation was already spiraling out of control. That night, Alexander's lawyer, Simon Gray, arrived unannounced. The men argued behind closed doors in the study. Their voices carried through the hallway sharp, tense, urgent. "You should have known this would leak." Simon said, "Someone inside the staff is selling information. If the press finds out she is pregnant," Alexander cut him off. "They will not. You cannot control everything." Simon snapped, "If this becomes public, your board will demand answers. Investors will panic." Claire stood frozen near the staircase, heart hammering as the words reached her. She was the secret they were talking about, the liability. The next morning, Alexander appeared in her doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes gave him away tired, restless, is burdened. "Pack your things," he said quietly. "You will move to a private villa until the baby is born. It is for your safety." Claire's throat tightened. "My safety?" He looked away. "Both. So you are hiding me, protecting you?" He corrected. Though his voice lacked conviction, her pulse rose, anger and heartbreak colliding. "Do you hear yourself? You made me part of your life. And now, you are erasing me because people might talk." "Claire," he said, stepping closer, "this is bigger than you think. The world I live in does not forgive mistakes. I am trying to fix this before it destroys everything." "Then maybe it should," she said softly. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, he turned away. "The car will be ready in an hour." Then he left, closing the door with a quiet finality that hurt more than shouting ever could. By afternoon, she was gone. The villa was far from the city, surrounded by tall pines and cold wind. It was beautiful, but to Claire, it felt like a gilded cage. Nights stretched endlessly, filled with the echo of what-ifs. She missed the sound of the piano, the soft murmur of Alexander's voice, even the way he would silently pass her a blanket when she fell asleep by the window. A week later, She found the article. Someone had posted photos of the contract, scanned pages showing her signature. Her name? The payment details. The words burned into her eyes. She felt sick, betrayed, exposed. She tried calling Alexander, but his number went straight to voicemail. She left a single message. "You promised to protect me." Was that another lie? Back in the city, Alexander was already in chaos. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Reporters surrounded his building. His assistant confessed she had leaked the contract to a rival publication for money. But the damage was done. His empire trembled under the weight of scandal. Alexander sat in his office long after midnight, rain beating against the windows. On his desk lay a printed headline, "The Billionaire's Secret Deal." He stared at it until the words blurred, then whispered to the empty room, "What have I done?" And far away, in the quiet villa he had chosen for her, Claire pressed her hands over her stomach as tears filled her eyes. The child kicked once, strong and certain. "You are all I have now," she whispered, "and I will protect you." Even from him, the morning the news broke, Alexander's world collapsed in real time. Screens in his office flashed headlines about scandal, betrayal, and moral hypocrisy. His phone rang without pause. Lawyers, shareholders, board members. But all the noise faded behind one thought. Claire. He had failed her. By noon, the damage control plan was already in motion. The assistant who leaked the contract had been arrested. But that did not undo what had been done. Every article, every photograph of Claire, was like a mirror showing him the worst version of himself. He drove for hours that night, through cold rain and narrow back roads, until the city lights vanished behind him. The villa stood silent against the forest, its windows dark. His hands trembled as he knocked. The door opened slowly. Claire stood there, pale and tired, wearing a loose sweater that could not hide the curve of her belly. For a long time, neither spoke. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice quiet but sharp. "I had to see you," he said. "I need to explain." "Explain what?" she whispered. "That you bought me like a commodity and then abandoned me when people found out." He stepped closer. "I never meant for you to be hurt. Someone betrayed us both." She shook her head, tears glimmering in her eyes. "You betrayed me, Alexander. You made me believe I mattered." He swallowed hard. "You do? Then why did you hide me? Why did you let them write my name like I was nothing?" He could not answer. The truth was too ugly. Fear, pride, the instinct to control everything. He had lost sight of what was real. Finally, he said, "I was wrong. Every decision I made was wrong. I thought protecting my image would protect you too. But all I did was destroy the only good thing left in my life." Claire's voice trembled. "You cannot undo what you have done. I am not sure forgiveness is even possible." "Maybe not," he said softly, "but I will still try." She turned away, unable to face him. "Leave. Alexander, I do not want your money, your apologies, or your pity. I just want peace for me and for this child." He hesitated, then took something from his coat pocket, a small velvet box. Inside was not jewelry, but the wooden guitar pick she had lost weeks ago. It was polished, had repaired, and engraved with 2 words. "For hope? I found this after you left," he said quietly. "It reminded me of who you were before I ruined everything." Her breath caught. "You kept it. I fixed it," he said. "Because you deserve something unbroken." For a moment, the air between them softened. Then Claire's hand pressed against her stomach, her face tightening in pain. The baby kicked hard, stronger than before. Alexander's calm vanished. "Claire, what is it?" "I think," she gasped, gripping the wall. "It is time." He rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. "Hold on. I will get help." The next hours blurred into chaos, ambulance lights flashing through the rain, hospital corridors echoing with hurried footsteps. Doctors surrounded her, voices, urgent but controlled. Alexander stood outside the delivery room, helpless for the first time in his life, praying to a God he had not spoken to in years. Then, a cry small, fierce, alive. The doctor emerged, smiling faintly. "A healthy baby boy," she said. "But the mother, she lost a lot of blood." She is stable now, but she needs rest. Alexander exhaled a sound that was half sob, half relief. He entered the room quietly. Claire lay pale but breathing, her eyes closed, her hand resting beside the sleeping newborn. He sank into the chair beside her and whispered, "You saved him. You saved both of us." She stirred, eyes fluttering open. "You are still here," she murmured. "I am not leaving again," he said, outside. Dawn broke over the horizon. Soft light touching the hospital window. For the first time, Alexander Reed felt what it meant to be human, not powerful, not in control. Just a man finally learning how to love. 3 months later, spring returned to New York. The city thawed from its long, gray winter, and for the first time in years, Alexander Reed walked without feeling the weight of his name pressing down on him. The scandal had faded into the background, replaced by new headlines. But the man who emerged from it was not the same. He spent every afternoon at the small community clinic, near the river where Claire was recovering with the baby. The world saw her as the woman from a tabloid story. But to him, she was the only part of his life that had ever felt real. Claire's strength came back slowly. She spent her mornings in the garden behind the clinic, sitting on a bench beneath the cherry trees, humming to the infant boy in her arms. The nurses adored her. They said the baby's laugh sounded like music. Alexander would arrive quietly, often carrying groceries or flowers he did not know how to give without awkwardness. One afternoon, he found her by the lake, sketching in a notebook while the baby slept in a stroller. She looked peaceful, sunlight glinting off her hair. For a moment, he simply watched her, afraid that speaking would break whatever fragile calm existed between them. When she finally looked up, she smiled faintly. "You are early today. I wanted to see how you both were." He said, "We are fine," she replied. "Better, I think." He nodded, then hesitated. "There is something I want to show you." He led her a few blocks away to a newly renovated building, a modest gallery space with large glass windows and a wooden sign above the door. Inside, sunlight filled the room, bouncing off framed sketches, watercolor paintings, and photographs. At the center of the gallery hung one large portrait, Claire, sitting under a tree, her hand on her belly, the faintest smile on her lips. Above the frame was a title in gold letters. "For Hope." Claire stared, stunned. "What is this?" "A project," Alexander said softly. "A foundation in your name. It will fund housing and healthcare for single mothers and children in need. You once told me hope was what made you feel alive. I wanted to make sure the world never forgot that." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why would you do this for me?" He took a deep breath. "Because I spent half my life building things that meant nothing. You reminded me that people are not investments, they are gifts. And I want to spend the rest of my life honoring that. If you will let me." She was silent for a long moment. The baby stirred softly in the stroller, and she reached down to touch his tiny hand. Then she looked back at Alexander, her voice trembling. "Do you really think someone like me belongs in your world?" He stepped closer, eyes steady. "No," he said. "I think we build a new one together." A slow smile crossed her face. She exhaled, half laugh, half sigh. "You always did have a way with impossible promises. And yet," he said gently, "you are still here." That evening, as the sun dipped low over the Hudson River, they walked together through the gallery, the baby sleeping between them. The air smelled of rain and blossoms, and for once, silence felt like peace, not punishment. Before leaving, Alexander reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the repaired guitar pick, the one engraved for Hope. He pressed it into her palm. "Keep it," he said. "It belongs to both of you now." She looked at him for a long moment, then leaned forward and kissed him softly, simply, like forgiveness made real. Outside, the city lights flickered to life. In that glow, they looked less like a billionaire and a homeless woman, and more like what they truly were. Two broken souls who had finally chosen healing over pride. And as they walked away, the sign above the gallery shone against the evening sky, proof that sometimes the best contracts are written not in ink, but in the quiet acts of love that last forever.